So, to be clear, whatever happens to your little leader, it's going.
The courthouse was charged with tension, the air heavy and charged. Seated at its center was Judge Joe Brown, 76 years old, a television icon, a man whose booming voice had formerly dominated daytime television like scripture. Sitting behind his mahogany bench, his eyes smoldered with fire. Standing across the room was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, 33, her sharp navy blazer, natural hair, pulled up to perfection. Her calm, her collected, her ready. Everyone in that room was aware of it. This wasn't going to be your ordinary case. This was going to become a war. What started out as a mere civil case had escalated the moment Crockett entered. Brown had witnessed her viral videos in Congress, the fast wit, the unapologetic clapbacks, and he didn't appreciate what he saw. And so when she approached to testify, his famous temper flared. "Miss Crockett," his voice boomed, rattling the room. "You believe with your fancy title in Washington, you can walk into my courtroom and disrespect the process?" The words thundered like a crack across the wood-paneled walls. Phones flew into the air. The gallery came to a halt. Everyone knew they were about to see the bout of the year. But Crockett didn't flinch. Her gaze met his, firm and unwavering. This was a woman who had defied Republican legislators on live television, who had made hearings go viral, who had earned a reputation for not being intimidated. And now she was prepared to demonstrate to Judge Joe Brown that his bluster would not intimidate her. What followed would leave the courtroom in shocked silence and fuel a social media frenzy that would have top billing for weeks. Before we get to that confrontation, you must know why this moment was significant, who these two giants were, and why tens of millions of Americans couldn't take their eyes away. Judge Joe Brown, a man who had turned his profession into a career of being the loudest voice in the room. From his early career as a prosecutor in Memphis to his dominion as television's toughest judge, Brown constructed his kingdom on a single credo. Power is derived from loudness. Respect is seized, not given. His courtroom was not merely a bench, it was his kingdom. And for decades, viewers adored him for it. But actual courtrooms aren't TVs here. Witnesses aren't competitors. They're citizens with rights. And in the smartphone era, the clock is always running. Every word, every flash of camera, every outburst, recorded, disseminated, weighed. The old tyrannies of ruling by fear no longer had the same bite, and that is where Jasmine Crockett enters the scene. A Democratic star on the rise, a lawyer who had honed her skills defending working families and small businesses steamrolled by corporate greed. A woman who had worked her way through law school, who had known struggle herself, who had built a career out of opposing power, not succumbing to it. Her journey to Congress was hardly straightforward, rejected as too young, too ambitious, too unconventional. But her people knew her differently. They knew a combatant who knew their struggle and bore their voice into Washington. Her biting questions in committee hearings, her uncompromising confrontations with hypocrisy, these weren't tricks. They were what she was. And now she was standing eyeball to eyeball with Judge Joe Brown, a throwback to the days when power insisted upon obedience, prepared to demonstrate that respect is achieved through virtue, not fear. This wasn't simply another court proceeding. This was a conflict of generations. Old school meets new wave, authority versus accountability. And the fire was about to be lit. What Judge Brown didn't know was that Jasmine Crockett spent her whole life preparing for the likes of him. She had dealt with hostile judges before, defied intimidation by the opposition, and learned that the loudest voice in the room isn't always the most powerful. But here the stakes were greater. This was not mere testimony. This was a conflict of worlds, two visions of leadership colliding in real time. Brown represented the old guard, authority vested in age, station, and fear. Crockett represented a new generation, power gained through preparation, intelligence, and standing one's ground right from the beginning of the morning session. The air was tense. Journalists hushed that never had they seen Judge Brown more upset before a witness, even began testifying, phones out, recording, just waiting. Something historic was in the making, and everyone sensed it. The doors slammed shut. The air conditioning creaked against the weight of bodies outside. People waited in throngs, longing to see even a glimpse of what was taking place on the other side of the doors. And then it started. "State your name for the record," Judge Brown barked, his voice having a hard edge. "Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, serving the people of Texas," she answered resolutely. Each word precise, her title clear. The judge's face turned black. "Here in my courtroom, you are nothing but a witness. Titles don't mean anything to me in here." The words echoed throughout the chamber. Fidgeting whispers, gasp. But Crockett didn't bat an eyelash. Steady, ramrod, straight, unfazed. "With respect, Your Honor," she replied calmly, "I am here to offer testimony regarding Mr. Williams's character as the court has requested. Don't you dare lecture me about what you're here for." Brown exploded, his voice rattling the gallery. "I've been running courtrooms since before you were born. You young people think you can waltz in here and demand respect without earning it." The outburst shook the room. Phones rose higher. Even the court reporter glanced up, startled. The bailiffs froze, torn between enforcing order and watching history unfold. Crockett didn't blink. Her voice remained steady. Her eyes remained fixed. "Your Honor," she answered, "I've earned my respect over years of practice, and through being elected by the people I represent, I am here to do my civic duty, civic responsibility." Brown sneered, disdain dripping. "You are here to make speeches. Just as it is when you testify before those committee hearings on the television, you think your YouTube hits make you special. Not in my courtroom here. I am in command." He stood up, black robes flying, pointing a finger at her like a dagger. His bellow shook the chamber. "I've seen your kind before, young, arrogant. Assuming the rules don't apply. Well, let me tell you something, Congresswoman." He spat the title like it was venom. "Around here you play by my rules." A chorus of gasps echoed through the gallery. Activists squirmed in their seats, some seething, some captivated. The room was electric, but Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. Her voice was level, her words slicing through the tempest. "Your Honor, I would never challenge your authority in this courtroom, but I will not permit anyone, position or not, to disrespect me or the office that I hold when I am acting professionally and within the bounds of this court." The hush that fell after was palpable. You could hear hearts beating. For an instant, even Judge Brown was taken aback. Then anger came back. His voice became louder, ringing off the paneled walls. "Disrespect me. You enter my home with your title and your heirs and expect special consideration. I don't care if you are a congresswoman, a senator, or the President of the United States in here. You treat me with respect." The fight was no longer over testimony. It was war. A war between generations unfolding before shocked lawyers, activists, and citizens. Behind the bench, Brown's clerk mouthed words to fellow clerks, wide-eyed. She had never witnessed him lose control like this. Lawyers in the gallery sent off texts, aware they were watching history unfold. Security moved restlessly. Reporters wrote furiously. The room itself appeared to shake beneath the magnitude of what was taking place. And amidst it all stood Jasmine Crockett, steady, silent, unflinching, a leader who would not yield even as the old guard raged all about her. This wasn't testimony alone. This was the day respect itself was being defined. Local journalists had arrived anticipating business as usual, a routine civil hearing buried in a courthouse few from outside Memphis ever saw. But by mid-morning, they were no longer reporters, they were witnesses. Witnesses to a confrontation already spilling well beyond those four walls. Phones were buzzing, editors were barking, camera crews were running. What was meant to be another entry in the court calendar was transforming into the story of the week. And inside, the atmosphere was charged. All eyes were on Jasmine Crockett. Would she buckle under the wrath of a judge who had built a career out of bending others to his? Or would she stand up not just for herself, but for everyone who ever had been instructed to know their place? The answer was delivered in a voice so cool, so measured, that it cut deeper than any cry ever could. "Your Honor, I showed up here today to do what the court asked." The room fell silent. Brown prepared himself for the usual retreat, the anxious apology, the surrender he had drawn from so many others. But Crockett refused to blink. She leaned forward into the tempest and turned it back around on him. "What I will not do," she said, hand held aloft in quiet authority, "is let anyone yell at me, berate me, or treat me with disrespect, just because they feel their role entitles them to do so." It struck like a thunderclap. Gasps, murmurs. Phones held even higher, capturing every moment of what they knew was history in the making. She took him apart piece by piece, not in anger, but in reasoning. "Respect," she told the court, "isn't created out of fear. It isn't bellowed into being. It is gained with dignity, justice, and integrity." And then there was the punch that shook the chamber to its core. "Tell me, Your Honor, is that how you treat all witnesses? Or is there something about a young black woman in Congress that evokes this kind of hostility?" The words sting harder than any gavel ever could. Brown's face reddens, his lips open, no sound. The judge is speechless for the first time. Crockett pushed on, every sentence a knife. "I see a man who has confused being tough with being in authority, who has confused loudness with truth. And I see a judge who is so threatened by a young woman who will not curtsy that he has forgotten the very fabric of justice he took an oath to protect." The crowd couldn't contain themselves. Some rose to their feet. Applause rippled through the gallery despite the bailiff's half-hearted attempts at control. Crockett hadn't just defended herself. She had shifted the very balance of power inside that courtroom. And then the coup de guerre face. She produced a folder from her purse, letters from judges throughout Texas, thanking her for the excellence of her legal understanding, for her professionalism, for her respect for the courts. She read them out loud individually, like bills too large to deny. When she finally asked, "Should I proceed, Your Honor?" Judge Joe Brown had nothing left. He slumped back in his chair, white, defeated, bereft of the armor that had sustained him for decades. By the time she finished, the confrontation was no longer a collision. It was a coronation. The internet went crazy that night. "Number Crockett claps back" became a trending topic across the country. Law students recited her words as gospel. Political pundits described it as a moment of a generation. And for the first time in years, Judge Joe Brown made an apology. What happened in that courtroom in Tennessee wasn't simply a court case. It was a clash of two ages. One man's booming, archaic model of respect based on fear, quashed by a new model of leadership founded on calmness, preparation, and unbreakable principle. For Judge Brown, it was a reckoning for Jasmine Crockett. It was a moment of definition, and for all who witnessed it within that courthouse and throughout the nation, it was affirmation that power doesn't reside in robes, gavels, or titles. It resides in character, and on that day, Jasmine Crockett indicated America exactly what that would look like.